We welcome you to Confident Living. I'm Iris Freelander, and my guest today is Raffi Dilsizian. Raffi, we welcome you on the show, and we're eager to hear about your ideas. I know that there's so much change going on in the world, and the ancient wisdom gives us guidelines for living. And one subject that's very much in the forefront of our thoughts is the mystery of
the mysteries, yes.
Yes, all the mysteries, the ancient mysteries.
That's right. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of areas that where students are afraid to discuss. There's a lot of taboos, and very often they're labeled as dogma and as areas that one shouldn't really spend time in studying and understanding. And these are usually specific points that need to be understood by the student of the esoteric. There's a number of different subjects: death and dying, reincarnation, free will, mysteries of evil. Do they exist? Do we create them? What is our relationship with them? And all these subjects are interwoven with each other. Unless the student understands at least the basics of this, the student of the esoteric will go in circles.
Yeah.
And there is a real problem right now. Most students that are serious, especially the serious ones, they are the ones that really fall into the traps.
Yeah.
And it's a real tragedy, because most churches are really not taking on this challenge, working with the students that want to go a step further.
Yeah.
It's usually looked upon as more of a problem student rather than an individual that is really trying to strive and ask questions that are normally not asked.
Yes. I can relate to that because I grew up in Kentucky where we didn't have any, we had the Methodist and Baptist churches, and they're wonderful. But I started believing in reincarnation when I was 5 years old, when a little playmate of mine died. And I looked at him in his casket, and reincarnation might not be the answer to a lot of questions, but on the other hand, it did answer at that time a lot of questions for me.
Yes, it can do that. At the same time, it opens up a whole Pandora of questions.
Yes.
It is just the beginning when one begins to question reincarnation. And I always tell my friends, it is not a subject you can believe or not believe. It is a question that has to be understood.
Yes.
There's many now who actually claim to believe reincarnation, mainly because they've seen a number of movies and it seems to make sense.
Yeah.
Movies in Hollywood are very, very well produced, and when you see it, you believe everything you see in it. And what makes it even more difficult, there is some truth in these movies mixed with illogical concepts. Yeah. It's Hollywood.
That's right.
And many, many people today develop their understanding of spiritual truths through these movies.
That's so unfortunate because it's so often not true.
And it very often isn't. I'm not attacking the concept of movies.
No, but movies are for entertainment.
Yes, and at the same time, they can be educational as we see it today. Sciences are not to be attacked, but the concept is sciences need to be redeemed, need to be spiritualized. I haven't heard of specialized consultants, let's say, who work with movie producers who specialize in the occult sciences. I see all these movies on ghosts, goblins, demons, and who are the researchers on these movies? They're writers specifically targeting their movie to a certain audience.
Yeah.
And you just cannot do that when you're dealing with these subjects. This is a very special subject.
Well, there is a very wonderful show on Channel 4. It's called The Other Side. And they present those mysterious things in a very comprehensive way, but they don't go into deeper mysteries and deeper truths and the ancient wisdom. And I know that you have taught classes and taught for years on those truths. And now you're from Lebanon, right?
That's correct. I'm of Armenian descent, but I grew up most of my adult life in the U.S. for the last 21 years.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
So you're essentially American.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
But I would think that in the Mid-East that the ancient mysteries are more accepted by the people as a whole.
They can be. That is true. There is more mysticism in the Asia Minor and Middle East, more so there than in the American lands. But that's an interesting subject in itself. The American tends to simplify things. And when a question is complex and negative, let's say, especially dealing with the questions of death or evil, they're turned off by it. Whereas in the Asia Minor, especially the Slavic people, they are just the opposite. If something is very simple and too easy, they're very nervous by it. They almost expect to suffer through it. So we have two extremes, the Slavic and the American. Anytime one is to explain a group soul, you try to find the other extreme.
Yeah.
The perfect polarity for the American would be the Slavic.
Yeah.
The Japanese would be the Chinese. See, but at the same time, the American has very, very important areas in faculties and gifts that the rest of the world hasn't developed or is not developed yet.
Yeah.
This is, as we know for the last 200 years from our founding fathers, it deals with the question of freedom of the individual, the rights of the individual. And this is a very important area that really came to be, began through the Roman citizen concept. So the American tends to question things much more. It's a young state. It is trying to learn, but it is not necessary to learn through error.
Yeah.
It's very difficult, very painful. One does not have to reintroduce the wheel over and over again. There is information out there if the student is willing to spend the time, patience, and respect to the information. There's a lot of occult groups especially Los Angeles, LA, and it makes it very confusing for the student. What is truth? And everyone claims to have the truth, which makes it even more confusing.
Yeah.
Where do you begin? Where do you go?
Well, we titled this segment "The Mystery of Evil," and to me, evil is error, and it's just error. And the error in our society in this respect is that we don't bring the deeper truths in to the teachings, and so then we learn about religion on a more superficial level. That is generally speaking, and to me, that's very unfortunate. It's part of the evolutionary plan, life plan, though. I believe that we have a certain destiny to fulfill.
That's correct.
And in order to fulfill that destiny, we had to go the way we're going. And we didn't have to go the way we're going, but it was necessary for a change because it couldn't happen if we just stayed the status quo. And the pendulum has to swing for one direction and then in the other direction. So, to me, it's very encouraging and hopeful that so many people are looking for deeper truths today.
That's right.
And they are looking. And along the way, as they look, they're finding the cults, and they're finding those groups that you and I wouldn't think would be necessarily productive. But yet, a lot of people have to go in one certain direction that we wouldn't think would be particularly good.
Well, there are many paths out there.
Yes.
But there are basic truths.
Yeah.
There are basic laws that the student of the esoteric studies should have an understanding of. One could be the understanding of evolution.
Yeah.
What is evolution? The understanding of the relationship of evolution between the spirit world, the macrocosm, and the microcosm, and how this relationship has changed through time, how the vertical and the horizontal relationship has changed. And once one has a feel for this, then the different religions, different philosophies start to fit a little better.
Yeah.
So there are basic information such as this that one can get their hands on, just like any science. Before you get the real meat,
Yes.
it's important to work and develop the vocabulary and have a good understanding of what is the basics. Most often people want it in a nutshell. Give it to me in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And that is very dangerous. Once you do that, then you've actually put yourself in a dangerous situation. We can be more specific. The whole concept of evolving, let's say, faster and learning faster is a faculty that has, I believe, become available to mankind the last 200 years or so. Before this, as we see in our history, leaders were always the elderly.
Yeah.
The young were never leaders in the past.
Yeah.
And there was a reason for that. Because in the past, one learned through repetition, through experience. But now we live in an age where one learns through imagination, inspiration, the faculty of cognizing. These are new faculties that we take for granted. In the past, the few initiates had these faculties. Now, students on the street, house mothers, they develop these faculties and they're not even aware of it. What happens when one has these faculties? We're, in a sense, we're like magicians, but we do not know where to direct our concentration. The churches, schools, the government, they haven't done their homework, and I don't really foresee them doing it. One can learn without experiencing things. And this is a faculty that really has become possible, I would say, the last 100 years. Through really experiencing someone else's pain, one can learn from it. So one can evolve through karma, through someone else's karma, by taking on their karma. It's a very dangerous game, but one can develop this. And a lot of people do it without even recognizing what they're doing and hurt themselves. But so what I'm saying, here's a very good example. Here's a faculty that has become available to mankind. It is not destructive in itself, but yet it can be destructive. It is a basic spiritual law. A gift can be destructive. It's a double-edged sword. If you're not ready for the initiation, it can destroy you. And many people are destroying themselves in this manner.
And without realizing what they're doing.
That's right.
And then on the other hand, it's possible to take on someone's karma. There's a wonderful book, a series of 3 books. He's written the 4th one now, Kyriakos Markides. And he wrote the Magos of Strovolos and about Daskalos who lived on the island of Cyprus. And he's a very wonderful spiritual teacher, and I'm sure he's a master, he's an initiate master. And he took on his son-in-law's karma because the son-in-law was going to die from that, from an illness that created a problem in his leg. And so Daskalos was able to take on that karma, and then he was able to hold the energy so that it wouldn't create a death of his body, but he almost died, and he was very ill like that for 6 months. And Markides asked him why he chose to do that, and he said, well, I don't want my grandchildren to be without a father. And it was the man's time to go. And by the spirit of grace and mercy,
that's right.
He was able to then take on that karma. And that's a very exciting aspect. And what you were just saying, that people inadvertently take on karma, well, that wouldn't be too good, because then they wouldn't be working through
that's right.
whatever needs to be worked through.
Well, what you're discussing is basically white magic.
Yes.
The white magician does not mean harm. He tries to heal.
Yeah.
And he does heal. But what if the individual that is being healed is not ready to be healed?
Yeah.
What you have just done is interfered in that individual's space. Even though they allowed you to come in, they were really not ready for it. there are many different kinds of magic. If we are to break it down and simplify it, you have black magic, gray magic, white magic, clear magic.
Mm-hmm.
We're all familiar with the concept of black magic through movies.
Yeah.
The basis there is interfere in someone else's space to do harm.
Mm-hmm.
Gray magic is to really use magic to develop powers without really meaning to do harm.
Mm-hmm.
White magic, as we explained, is to help people, and very often when they're not ready for it. Clear magic is the most interesting, that interests and fascinates me. It takes the most time, the most patience, where the healer becomes more of a midwife.
Yeah.
And the healer helps the individual, and
Work
in
through.
their own time, in their own rhythm, the patient actually becomes a student and heals themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And what is really happening, there is a metamorphosis taking place,
Mm-hmm.
whereas the energy is not really being taken out, the negative energy, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a good massage therapist wouldn't just put a wall between them and the patient, which is an exercise that is done very often. One can call it the Christ wall or what have you. Others could use another faculty, which is to release the patient's illness as a conduit and release it into the earth.
Mm-hmm.
When you do that, what you're doing is you're taking out an energy, even though it is too cold or too hot, it is still part of that individual's energy.
Mm-hmm.
And two things happen when you do that. You drain the patient, and the second effect of it is much of this stays in the healer.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult for the healer to release all of this out of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The safest, the most difficult in many respects, and what I mean by that, the most time-consuming, is when you actually help metamorphosize the problem in the patient
Mm-hmm.
with the assistance of the patient.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, in many respects, I call it foot washing.
Mm-hmm. How would you define the act of doing the white magic healing, the clear magic healing?
The clear magic, well, in many respects, it should come naturally.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just say, well, I'm going to practice clear
Yeah.
magic now. As you're teaching, it happens. As the student is listening,
Mm-hmm.
and as their consciousness develops, it is happening.
It's not like a laying on of hands. It's not like aura cleansing.
Well, laying our hands and aura cleansing is a beginning.
Yes.
It gives the patient time so they can start working on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
A good healer would never claim that by laying hands, I have cured you. I have
Mm-hmm.
given you time now to be able to start curing yourself.
Yes. Well, for one thing, the healing comes from God. It doesn't come from the healer, from the channel who's healing. So they are just that, a channel. And also, to me, the laying on of hands is wonderful for those people who work in that way. But to me, a higher way is different than that. And it's you don't have to touch the person. You just pray and work in a higher sense, on a higher level, and raise their consciousness. And by raising your own consciousness, you raise their consciousness. Because I've seen where the laying on of hands has been done,
Mm-hmm.
it just does the superficial work, and
That's
it usually comes back again.
It can.
The illness
Usually
usually comes
does.
back again.
Sometimes it comes much stronger.
Yes.
It's because the problem
It has not been alleviated.
hasn't.
No.
No.
It's been temporarily stopped.
That is correct.
Mhm.
That is correct.
How do you teach about clear magic and in a healing way? Because people are interested in healing, and it's a very vital part of our lives. And I know that many are healers. I had the good fortune to have met Harry Edwards. You've probably heard of Harry Edwards of England. Well, he was probably the world's best-known spiritual healer.
Mm-hmm.
And also Ambrose and Olga Warhol were very wonderful healers. They healed in a Methodist church in Baltimore, Maryland. And Agnes Sanford was a marvelous spiritual healer. And Rebecca Beard is another one. She was a medical doctor, And she had such wonderful success healing people in a metaphysical, esoteric way that she stopped her medical practice and just healed in that way. And she healed in a higher way of healing from the deeper level.
Yes. Well, it can be done. What I'm suggesting is that for permanent healing to take place, as you suggested, there needs to be a change in the consciousness of the individual.
And do you have some tips on that? Do you have some clues on how people would work in that way?
Well, as I said, there really is no formula. The things one needs to concentrate on is respect, patience, and sacrifice. These are virtues that we take for granted, but most people do not have patience, do not want to sacrifice, and are not willing to pay the price for it. They want it easy, they want it fast. And in a sense, that's what's happening. And when we have teenagers that are getting high, what is happening there?
Yeah.
They're striving for something that they know exists, but it is done in a wrong manner, because when you do get high, you open the window prematurely, without any controls.
That's true.
And what happens in many respects, especially if the individual is young, they haven't developed their own center yet. And when they get high, they do not know what to come back to.
Yeah.
So what's very interesting, and I see this happening now, these young teenagers develop multiple personality at a very early age. And once you have this problem, unless you can really work at it, you're stuck with it the rest of your life. Multiple personality problem is a very serious problem. And this is where the mysteries of evil can come in, because once you have multiple personalities, you're not in control as much. And entities are sucked into these situations because you have just created an imbalance. Retarded beings is what I would call them. And they are not in control. They are sucked into the situation. Illogical thinking, premature initiations, these create the fertile ground for these entities to come in.
Well, everyone looks for a how-to. How-to. So how would you say how to avoid those harmful aspects, and how to really go with the light?
Well, it's never that simple.
I know.
Do not get high when you're young. There are initiates that have experimented with different herbs, and they have been successful. But these are initiates who have special incarnations in the previous lives. They are in full control when they journey into the spirit world. Don't attempt it. A lot of times what happens, the Chela, the student, presumes that they can follow what their leader has done. And in so doing, they fall into traps. If you are going to experiment with deep meditative states, especially taking on drugs, soft drugs or hard drugs, do not do it.
Which we would say to avoid.
Avoid it altogether.
By all means to avoid.
Especially if you're not 16 or 18 yet. There are major spiritual problems that take place if you get high. Even alcohol could do the same thing. As long as one is high, which means...
change the consciousness. Anything that changes the consciousness.
That's right. Which means you have no more protection. You have just broken all the barriers that are around you. I've seen, especially this century in America, there's this new impulse that looks at barriers around us as negative. And there's a lot of these new positive thinking workshops that have actually now become spiritual movements. And the emphasis is to break these barriers. Well, those barriers do limit our growth. That is true. But very often they also protect us. There is a reason why they are there. And a good teacher is very slow in peeling these layers from the student.
Yeah.
Because, but what is happening now, most students out there, they're on their own anyway. So they take some drugs or they experiment with certain meditations, Kundalini or what have you, and they can really develop multiple personalities from these exercises, especially since in this age, the retarded beings, as I would call them, have evolved to such a point. As soon as there is an imbalance, they're right there.
Yes.
They're right there.
And so we just need to encourage people to guard against that by avoiding drugs at all times and meditating and praying specifically for protection.
That's right. At the same time, I can give another talk and just say almost the opposite. It's important to protect yourself. At the same time, if you're paranoid of things attacking you, of things happening to you, that paranoia itself is a trap.
Yes, so we need to be positive in our approach. Raffi, I'm sorry that our time is up today, but I look forward to having you be my guest again next week.
Thank you.
And perhaps we can go into other aspects of this. It's very fascinating. I thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And we hope you have enjoyed Confident Living and look forward to seeing you again next week.
Such a blessing I can't depart. Confident living helps me expand visions of value, the kingdom at hand. Confident living, talent to win, gift of the Spirit moves from within.